Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome everyone to another episode of Tuesday Talks and Tips. I cannot believe it myself, but we are now at episode 18. We've had 18 or 17 episodes. This is episode 18. And this time it's a panel discussion. We are talking about the HPL project, and what I will do is introduce. We were supposed to have four panelists. We have just three right now. If the fourth panelist doesn't show up, then we will have enough material among the three. If he does, then I will introduce him later. In the meantime, though, what I would like to do is to introduce the panelists, and then we will go on to them speaking, each of them speaking for 2 to 3 minutes about their HPL project, and then we will open the floor for questions from the audience. My request to everyone is please keep yourselves muted during the initial 12 to 15 minutes when the panelists will be speaking, and then we will open to questions. In the meantime, if you have a burning question that you cannot wait to ask after they are done, you can type it in the chat. If this is your first time and you're not familiar with where the chat bar is, bring your cursor down to the bottom of your screen. You should see somewhere middle of the screen or below bottom middle, you should see a blurb or a like a chat icon. Click on that, then you will see a chat box appear on the right side of your screen, and you can type your question in there and then click send, and we will see it and we can respond as soon as the Q&A portion comes up. So let me introduce our panelists in no particular order. Well, maybe let's do this with order of distance, starting with Graham Cairns from Queensland, Australia. He's a multiple DTM. He is based in Queensland, Australia, where he's a member of three existing or current clubs, plus another one in formation, a prospective club. He is also a member of three online-only undistricted clubs and joined a blended slash online offline club in District 27 as it became one of the first districts to pilot a trial of pathways. That was back in, oh, so long ago, March 2017. Graham has completed 2 HPLs, one in the traditional program and one in pathways for effective coaching. And he is in the planning stages for another, for innovative planning, along with his Pathways Distinguished Toastmaster project, which shares many attributes with the HPL, but is also quite different in some ways. There. So Graham will be one of our panelists. Our second panelist will be, well, not our second, another panelist will be Jay. His complete name is Dhananjay Parkhe, or nickname Jay. He is a Toastmaster, believe it or not, from September 2018. He is a member of 2 online clubs and 1 on-site clubs. He has done pathways, he has completed 2 paths, effective coaching, presentation mastery. Oh, I stand corrected, 3 effective coaching, presentation mastery, and engaging humor. He is a Pathways Mentor certificate holder. His HPL projects were as contest chair for area level competition, and for another project. I will leave that for him to speak about later. Then our third, and I'm not saying saving the best for last, but I just love having George on a panel discussion because he was one of the first to get us started on pathways. He was the chief guide, pathways guide of District 57. He has been with Toastmasters for 16 years and has served in many different district leadership roles. He led the team, as I mentioned, that introduced Pathways to District 57 in the very first Pathways pilot. And then he did the same for the undistricted clubs. And I was one of those online Pathways guides on that team for undistricted clubs around the world. He has earned 3 Distinguished Toastmaster Awards in the traditional program and 1 in Pathways. George has completed 4 HPLs plus the Pathways DDM project, which has very many similarities to an HPL. He has also served in many HPL guidance committees. Whew, I mean, that's a lot of information, but I felt that it was important to share that, considering that we are going to be asking our panelists to share their experiences about HPL projects. So at this point, welcome to those who just came in while I was introducing. I see some familiar faces. Hi there. I won't name everyone, but anyway, let us now start the clock with each of our panelists speaking for about 2 to 3 minutes. And warning, George and Jay, they know this. I will try not to time, not disrupt you. But if you go way beyond 3 minutes, you will see the hearts coming up, okay? But I'm sure you will be timing yourselves. So who do we want to start first? Jay, would you like to be the first to start telling us about your HPL experience for 2 to 3 minutes? Would you care to unmute yourself?
Sure. Good morning and good afternoon, good night to everyone present. I would like to share my very interesting first experience of HPL, which was International Speech Contest Chair in our area, which had 6 clubs. And we had 3 competitions. One was the International Speech Contest, second was humorous speech, and third was the evaluation speeches. So we had 6 clubs participating in the area, and we had 3 speakers each. Now, if you time, the total time taken for just speeches was coming to about 386 minutes, apart from the 18 minutes of introduction. And that was a big, big challenge. So we had a full day event planned. We started with a guidance committee, which had the chief judge, we had the area director, the district director, and the president, who's also my mentor. So we had 5 members apart from me in the guidance committee. We had 3 meetings planned, and we went ahead with this program. Uh, there was one speech which we gave at the beginning in our different clubs about the project. And after the event, we also had one learning speech where we shared the learnings. And the final outcome was that we decided to make this into 2 events, one having humorous speeches and evaluation speeches, and one specifically reserved for international speech competitions. So that was a very interesting experience. Uh, Managing the time was the biggest challenge, and generating templates for each role player was another. And that was a lot of background work which we had to do to time the event. Uh, the best comment we had was, how did you manage the time so well? I don't see the heart coming up, so let me stop at this stage. Thank you.
No, no hearts, no hearts. Thank you so much, Jay. I know that, we all want to comment and ask him questions, but let's hang on to that and then move on to either George or Graham. Let's do who's faster on the draw now. Who unmutes first, George or Graham?
I
George
win.
did. He wins. Go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle. As you happen to mention, I've done 4 HPLs and a DTM project, and I'm going to report on the 3rd HPL because I think in some ways it was most interesting, although all of them were interesting. I was the public relations chair for the District 57 Fall Conference, 216 if it matters. And I had been the PR chair once before and felt like we could do a better job on how we got out to our members. And in particular, email is our most popular and our most effective method of talking to our members about conferences. And so I wanted to do a project trying different things in email and how we reached it. We didn't change anything else particularly. We used social media, we used videos, we had the area and division directors, sending out messages to their clubs. So it's not the only thing we did. Now, of course, the people that benefited were the members and the leaders in District 57. We had a nice program that day, a great keynote speaker, and we really wanted to get the word out to everybody. Now, again, why I picked it was I just felt like we could do a better job. The first time I was the PR chair, I've done it twice, I was working with a very experienced conference chair. She had already been a conference chair once before. Let's just say she gave me wonderful guidance on what to do. And I did my share of things, but I was following her lead. For this other one, we didn't have that situation. It was more of a green team. And I was considered the experienced person at that point. And I really wanted to try to get even more people to our fall conference. Remember fall conferences? Back when we did. So what we did, again, the focus was on email. My guidance committee was the conference chair, the education program chair, and the public relations manager. I think we called him a PRO back at that time. And the action team was basically the other members of the PR team, including the person that ran the email blast and the website and the social media and so forth like that. Over a period of 3 months, kind of a late start actually, we tried 10 different blasts, and the technique was we tried to do something different for each email blast. Sometimes we focused on the particular content. Sometimes we focused on the subject line. Sometimes we used video. Sometimes we didn't. We focused on different aspects and tried a bunch of different things. And the bottom line, the great thing was we did have good conference registration. It was close to 300 people, which for us, our size district at that time, was pretty decent turnout. What I didn't see was as much difference as I was hoping. I can tell you with some authority that Tuesday morning was the best time to send an email to our members soliciting them for the conference. That was about it. So I will stop there and we'll go on to the next person.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And at this point, Graham, you're on.
Thank you, Michelle. I've conducted I've been involved in two high-performance leadership projects that I've been organising, and I'd like to stress that the L in leadership remains crucial whether we're talking about the traditional program or the Pathways program. In the first HPL that I did, my home club at the time was celebrating its 500th meeting, which is not a bad achievement, I thought. And so we were arranging things like making sure that there were as many of the original charter members as we could find turning up, that we had certificates being presented from not only our club, but also from the division and district director. We had a former presidential citation winner along to the meeting to help celebrate the event. We organised food and drinks and all those sorts of things. And it was basically all happening within my club. And that made it quite easy. And the members of my guidance committee were all physically located in the same city as me as well, which made it very easy to organise. The second one, on the other hand, was entirely done online. It was for an online-only club, and it was a public relations campaign that was designed to create a series of video vignettes to promote storytelling. It's a storytelling club. That was a more difficult exercise, partly because the members of the High Performance Leadership Guidance Committee were literally all over the world and in differing time zones. Those in North America are on a completely different time zone to those in Eastern Europe. and those in Western Europe who are in different time zone once again to those of us in Australia. And so it was difficult to try and get the HPL committee together. And then it was difficult, once we got that organised, to get the members of the club to actually commit to and then create the videos that we all agreed was a good thing. Whether it was a successful HPL project is, well, I'll discuss that a little later if the opportunity comes up. But I will say that if nothing else, I learned about how to deal with different members of a team in different time zones and with different cultural expectations. So that's been my experience with a Pathways HPL project.
Thank you, Graham. And if you, I don't know if anyone noticed that I was nodding vigorously and chuckling to myself, because when Graham was speaking about the online club, I was a member of that club. So it seems just appropriate that, Graham, you'll be the first person I'd like to hear from on this question, which is, what was the most valuable lesson or insight or benefit that you gained from your HPL projects, plural?
All right, from both of the projects, as I say, leadership to me was the skill that is most important. And all too often a HPL project ends up being whoever the HPL project organizer ends up doing the work. And that's not what a HPL is about. Delegation is a skill that I am still to this day learning to deal with. But having said that, the other side of leadership is knowing when to step in and say, okay, you were supposed to do this, it hasn't happened, how do we get past this roadblock? As I say, I wouldn't call my second HPL project a success, but I wouldn't call it a failure either. In the end, we didn't end up creating the library of vignettes that we were aiming to create. But the skills that we all learned in that have proved to be extremely valuable to all of us as online presenters. Learning how to deal with video, learning how to deal with creating a story in a very limited time frame. And I note that one of my fellow club members is now looking to repurpose that campaign for a different club in a different way, but using the skills that we learned. So I wouldn't say that it was a failure, but I would say that it didn't succeed the way that I intended. But one of the things that I do like about it is that we have all learned something in the process, something which I will bear in mind with my next project.
Great point there, great point. Jay, would you like to jump in, answer that same question? What was the most valuable insight or lesson or benefit that you gained from doing your HPL project?
Yeah, this was a very exciting experience for me, doing it for the first time. To me, the best part was the teamwork involved. Everyone preparing as per their templates that we initially created. Finally, the time management part, managing the time, managing the expectations, because we had a whole 10-hour event on our hands, and it had to go like clockwork. That was a big challenge, and there was a big learning over there. The second part is I learned some nuances of how to manage the judges, how to keep their identity secret, how give the importance to the chief judge, and having co-chairs, because in a 10-hour event you can't just have one contest chair. We were rotating between three of us, and we also had 6 sergeant at arms. We had 6 timers, because for each contest we required 2. So small nuances of managing the show were great learnings doing it for the first time. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. Those are very valuable learnings. What about you, George? You've done several HPLs, so what would you say would be the most valuable lesson or insight that you gained from it?
Well, let's see, if we consider all the HPLs, they were just all fun to do, and I really enjoyed them. If we focus in on the one I mentioned earlier, since this was my third one, I was kind of past issues like how do you put together a team? How do people work together? I was working with people I knew, and so it was a pretty compatible bunch there. It was, I would say it was partially successful. What I had hoped, my high ambition was to come out of that project at the end of the conference with guidelines for every future PR chair of every one of our conferences to use to know what day and what hour you should send the emails, and some ideas about the best subject lines and those kind of things. We didn't quite achieve that, but we did learn some things. We learned, for example, early bird is really important. The message you send saying early bird registration is about to expire, oh, that one got a really good response. And the way we measured, by the way, wasn't simply responses to our emails or opens. We measured it by the number of registrations that immediately followed our email. So we were actually measuring something that happened there. We also found out that talking about the keynote speaker was fairly valuable. That was a valuable content, and that people would react to that. That was pretty good. We also learned a couple of negative lessons, which, as I mentioned, we only had 3 months for this. The entire conference team kind of got a late start, unfortunately. Is that, and you send out an email and there's basically no content. If it was come to the conference because the conference will be wonderful, trust us, those don't get much response. They really don't. The only people that will respond to that message are the lifers, the ones that are going to go to every. I see Graham and Michelle nodding their head. You know what I'm talking about. So it did work. We did get some guidelines. We've been using video ever since because video seemed to help quite a bit. And that was a primary lesson that came out of it for us.
Great lesson there. And yeah, we were chuckling because we would go regardless. But, and then of course, there's the opposite where you have a mile-long email, which people stop reading halfway through. At this point, I I appreciate how everybody kept themselves muted and quiet. Thank you so much. I know how hard that is for Toastmasters. Let's now field questions from our audience. You can either just unmute yourself, or if you wish, raise your hand first, but you can just unmute yourself. I'm watching on gallery view, so I will see that. Or if you prefer to type your question or comment on the chat box, that will work as well. I'm watching both. So go right ahead. Unmute yourself if you have a question or a comment. And I think Jim, yes, Jim, go ahead.
My voice audible?
Yes, loud and clear from Montana.
Thank you. I've done 2 HPL projects myself. Both of them have been out of Toastmasters. One was a labor negotiation that resulted in a union contract, and the other one was the organization of a National Day of Prayer involving about 20 people. But both of them have been outside of Toastmasters. Does someone else have experience of HPLs done outside of Toastmasters?
Yes, I believe that Jay's second HPL, or one of his HPLs, am I correct, Jay, that one of them was outside Toastmasters, or was that just me reading
No,
something into what you said?
both were inside Toastmasters.
Both of them.
I do have one which I'm currently working on, which is outside of Toastmasters, but I still have to choose the path before I do that. That's with a NGO which I am advising, which is into eye care, and we have performed about 20,000 cataract surgeries free of charge, distributed about 300,000 spectacles to school children, again free of charge. So that's one project we are working on.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a great idea, because that will really benefit not just an organization, but a community. Graham or George, has either of you done or are you planning to do an HPL that is outside Toastmasters?
It's not my plan to do, my next HPL will be within Toastmasters. My DTM project I am still considering, but I think it will probably be Toastmasters based as well. George, you?
I have one that I would say was on the fence to outside Toastmasters, and that was doing the TV show. District 57 has had a television show for quite a long time. We currently broadcast primarily on YouTube. And although it is sponsored by District 57, the HPL actually involved improving the production values and the content of the show, and was somewhat independent of Toastmasters. There were no officers involved. There was no club involved. It was strictly TV productions. And so we were considering things like, where does the host come on? How do they come on? How do you transition the cameras from this part of the stage to that part of the stage? What kind of things should the host say? How long should the entire thing be? What guidelines do we want to give speakers? And of course, many of them were talking about their business rather than Toastmasters, so that was completely unrelated. So it was certainly something that was associated with Toastmasters, but ultimately we were dealing with a studio that we were simply one of 30 shows on every month, and they didn't care what the sponsoring organization was. So that was semi-Toastmasters, I would say.
That's great. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if I can follow on, something that George just said then reminded me, not of the HPL project that I have done outside the organisation, but that one of my HPL guidance committee members did for his HPL. And that is, he's involved with an organisation called Circle of Men, which is essentially older men living in aged care facilities, lose contact with the rest of the world, and they lose contact with other men because there are no support groups for frail aged men living in aged care facilities. And so, as I say, one of my guidance committee members ran his HPL in a way to grow and develop an organisation which provided support to those men, an organisation called Circle of Men. And some of the differences between what I was doing with my inside Toastmasters HPLs and what he was doing with his outside was that he was still getting feedback from Toastmasters and his guidance committee about communication skills and about leadership skills, but he was actually having to deal not just with people who understood the process, but with people who were concerned. They didn't care about the process of a high performance leadership project. They were concerned about the results of his project, if that makes sense. And that changed the focus for him from it being, I am learning about leadership for Toastmasters, to I am using my Toastmasters leadership skills to benefit this community organisation. So if that helps, Jim, that's, I think, the primary difference. It's a difference in focus between what you want to achieve out of it.
Thank you, Graham. And you reminded me as you were speaking, one of my clubmates is doing an HPL in a senior community. It's actually three buildings. It's kind of almost a village. Very seniors. I think the oldest one is 105 years old, and the youngest is probably in his very late 70s. And although we are there as Toastmasters, like you said, his focus is on helping those senior residents. Because I'm part of his guidance committee and his action team, we are envisioning that we can help the senior residents create something like a storytelling or a chronicle of their lives. And maybe the product would actually be a physical book that they could maybe even publish. We're not trying to go there. That might be too high an aspiration, considering that half of them can't remember our names. I mean, they kind of remember our faces when we visit. We go once a month, and then we don't do Toastmasters meetings per se. We just have stories, like extended table topics. So again, although it's an HPL and he's doing Share His Vision, and I think he will be going on and presenting his results in a couple of months. But the point is, it's really helping these residents, senior residents in this community, and it's so heartwarming. You know, we leave the meeting and sometimes, you know, we go for coffee and we're teary-eyed. We're saying, wow, she was yodeling, did you hear her? She was sharing her story, and this 105-year-old lady used to skydive. I mean, seriously, I mean, wow. I think we are gaining more than they are just by trying to do this project and being part of this HPL team. So thank you very much. At this point, I have a couple of other questions, but I wanted to invite somebody who's here, and, you know, if you feel that you're not ready, don't have to speak up, but there's somebody else who's starting to plan her HPL, wherein she will be helping students in a kind of, you know, underprivileged area, and she'll be working with the school and with the parents. So I don't know if, without naming her, do you want to unmute yourself and speak, or is it too early yet? Okay, can you want to unmute yourself? Okay, go ahead,
Hello, everyone.
Rashmi.
So my query is, I am a stay-at-home mom. I'm not working, but I am the eco school committee member in my daughter's school. So what I was thinking for the HPL project, that in as I am the member of this eco school committee, so I must handle. My idea is to conduct a seminar within the school regarding e-waste, how to manage the e-waste. So I want to do, it's my own idea, still I didn't talk much about this idea with so many people. What I was thinking to do, organize a seminar within the school with students and their parents and with the teachers. So for this, I am thinking, as I need a guidance committee, so there will be at least 3 members. So one, the Toastmaster, and 2, I have to take from the school from a senior teacher, and 1, the CEO herself is interested to be the part of that seminar. So is that okay? My first question is the guidance committee is okay? And second one is that when I will organize this seminar, so most of the members, the team members will be only from the school. So is that mandatory for me to make a team from the Toastmasters or from the schools? So there are 2 queries from my side.
Jim may be able to answer that, since he has run HPLs involving outside organisations. Can I suggest that, Madam Facilitator?
Sure. And I think Jim is getting ready to answer. Yes, he's unmuted himself.
Yes, my committee reviews were people, it was the president of a college and the negotiating team on the first HPL I did, where we arrived at a union contract. And my review committee was actually 2 other individuals. One was the superintendent, the county superintendent of schools, and then the other person was the county extension agent. So I had 2 highly qualified people. One of them was involved in Toastmasters and the other had been involved in Toastmasters. So I used people who were very knowledgeable about Toastmasters. The other event, the other HPL that I did was, again, outside of Toastmasters, and it was organizing the National Day of Prayer. It involved about coordinating about 20 people and a radio station into this project, and we were broadcast over about half of the state of Montana, which is a very large area, about the size of Texas. Montana is a very large state here in the United States. But that group turned out to be the Ministerial Association uh, staff or the people involved there. So my teams were put up of basically people outside of Toastmasters. In one event, there were Toastmasters involved, and the other event, the other HPL, there were no Toastmasters involved.
And just if I can finish a point there, Michelle, the
Sure.
guideline to this project says you are to select a project to complete with a team of at least 3 other members. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to be 3 other Toastmasters members. They just have to be 3 other members of your team. So in Jim's case, they would be from outside Toastmasters. In my case, they were all from within. In Rashmi's case, 1 would be from within and the rest would be from without. And that, as far as I can see, if I were a VPE, I'd be perfectly happy to sign off on that.
Absolutely, yes. And I have I have been an HPL guidance committee member. We have had people from the community, and especially when it's a project that's serving the community or serving an organization other than Toastmasters, it just makes sense. I mean, you want to have inputs, you want to have guidance or comments from the organization or the community or the group that you're intending to serve with your HPL. Does anybody else want to add in a couple of their own comments, or their maybe take this particular question a little bit farther from your own experience?
Yeah. Can I speak, Michelle?
Sure, Jay. Go ahead.
Yeah, in this particular case, having dealt with various schools and being a chairman of board of studies for a couple of universities, let me share my suggestion to you. I would request you to have 3 silos. That means a committee of 2 people each. One, which is a subject matter specialist, which is your e-waste part. Second, have at least 2 people from Toastmasters. So that is your second committee, which is the guidance committee. Third, which is your organizing committee at the school, which is organizing the seminar, which is taking care of the logistics and the entire management of the program. So you have 3 silos in which you have first meeting. In the second meeting, because you need to have at least 3 meetings, in the second meeting, you combine the 3 and get 6 people together. There you design the program, the flow of events, the sequencing, the number of speakers, and the total time management. In the third meeting, you will probably give it a shape and may do a kind of a simulation exercise if you can for a short while, where you look at the timing of the projects, because time is most critical. People should not feel it is wasted. Then in that third meeting, you look at the type of audience you want to choose and accordingly have the speakers aligned to your subject. Now, that's the approach I would take if I were you. Currently, I'm doing a program which is organized by the National Planning Commission for about 2,000 schools, where I'm a mentor for one of the schools in Bangalore. And here we have one mentor for each school, which is doing various projects. And in that, when we do the leadership program, one of my HPL projects, which I'm thinking about, is on having a YLP at the school, because the last section of this program is about leadership and speaking skills, which are
Okay,
important to the...
wonderful. There's so much information in this group. There's a plethora of sharing opportunities. What I recommend is, Rashmi, reach out to Jay and remind me if you wish. I can connect the 2 of you, because it looks like you're both in education and could benefit from a more detailed conversation about your HPL. Wonderful. I feel great that I didn't want to throw you under the bus there, Rashmi, because I knew that you were still early on planning your HPL. But this is actually great to start it early, not to get right smack and then have to scramble like certain people do. But, you know, there's that adrenaline, but it's also really good to start it early. That would be one of the insights that I would like to share from having done my own HPLs. Is there any other question before I ask? Because I have a series of questions ready, but I don't want to just be the person asking questions. Anyone else with a question? Yes, I see Adrian has raised his hand. Thank you so much, Adrian. Go ahead and unmute yourself. There you are.
Oh man. Have you had ever one of those moments where you forgot your question?
Oh, absolutely. I do that mid-sentence.
Was the question about the difference between HPL and DTM project?
That was one of my questions, but I had a question regarding to what Jay and Rashida were talking about. And sorry, I have to pass in this.
Don't worry, it will come back. And here's my suggestion, Adrian. The moment it comes back, instead of hanging on to it, type it into the chat box and click send. So we will all see it, you know, and then whenever there's an opportunity, we can insert a response, or even during the chat, in the chat itself, somebody can respond to you. That will address that. Poof, it flew away. Okay, so I see that Graham was actually leading into that next question I was going to ask. Thank you so much. It's really helpful to have a little bit of a hidden script, right, Graham? So the next question I was going to ask all three of you panelists is, what do you see as the differences, or more starting with the similarities between the traditional HPL and the Pathways HPL? And of course, Jay, you can pass on this because you joined when your club was already on Pathways. So Graham or George, very quickly, what would you mention as the similarities? Because I know both of you in your intros mentioned that it's really mostly very similar and there might be a few differences. So just if you could speak maybe to the similarities, and then if there's one or two differences. George
Well, let
is
me
already
take a shot
unmuted.
at that. Let me take a
Yes.
shot at that. There aren't many differences. If you take the old HPL book, I think many of you have seen, and you imagine it, someone being given the job to rewrite it into Pathways text style and Pathways structure and organization, that's it. Now, there are indeed some differences. For example, we now have 360-degree evaluation feedback. We did not have that before. If you read the criteria for the project, there actually are some subtle differences in what they say, but the way I read it, any project that would have been an acceptable HPL project in the old program probably would qualify on the new one as well. So for all practical purposes, World Headquarters is the only one that thinks they're different.
I'd agree. I'd say I would agree with George, by the way, about the 360-degree evaluation. Now, 360-degree evaluations are something that's new to me. I know that they're not new to everybody, but I love the 360-degree evaluation. I get so much value out of getting responses, not only from those to whom I am answerable and from those over whom I have authority, but from my peers and from outsiders as well. It's really great to get that. I actually think of it as a 720-degree evaluation because I get them not just from above, below, and beside, but from front and back as well. If you haven't done a 360-degree evaluation, you will, I think, enjoy the process. Where I would not disagree with George, but expand it a little, is there isn't a great deal of difference between the legacy DTM, the legacy HPL and the Pathways HPL. The difference is the importance of the HPL. It used to be that the HPL was what was required to finalise your DTM, Distinguished Toastmaster. Now there is a separate project called the Distinguished Toastmaster Project, which shares a lot of DNA with the HPL, but there is one, and I think crucial difference, and that is that the DTM project specifically requires you to have at top of mind a specific benefit to the organisation that you are doing this for. Now, whether that is Toastmasters, whether that is your local P&C association, whether it is your church, doesn't matter what the organisation is, you need to have a specific, and you have to be able to write down in a single line what the benefit is going to be for this organisation when you are completed, which is a change of focus. You also don't need a guidance committee, although a guidance committee is certainly not going to be a bad thing if you're trying to do a DTM project, but it differs subtly from the high performance leadership. The high performance leadership is, I think, only required, George, you may be better than I am, required in three parts. Yeah. And I'm doing two of them. It's only required in 3 parts, but it is an option. You can do it as an elective in pretty much all of them if you want, although I'm not sure it would really fit into presentation mastery. But anyway, whereas the DTM project is required to get your Distinguished Toastmaster under pathway. So there are subtle differences, but the most important difference between the two, though, I think, is that you have to have a definable benefit for the organisation that you are using as your sponsoring organisation, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Graham. And again, you have opened the door as a perfect segue to the next question I was going to ask the panelists, which is, what is the difference between the HPL project and the DTM project in Pathways? Because like you already succinctly explained, so many people get confused about that, but they are two different and distinct things. So since you've already had your, well, at least you can add to it later on, Graham, but I would like to hear George as well. And Jay, although Jay, I know you're not into the DTM yet, but I know you've started researching that. So George, definitely tell us, what are the differences between the HPL project and the DTM project in Pathways? If you see any differences.
Yes, there certainly are some. As Graham said, there is more of an emphasis on the benefit. Now, I think that may be a more of a formal than a practical, in that practically all the HPL projects I've involved in or reviewed or whatever have benefited someone. So there is a difference there. The other huge, big difference is the way the program is structured. A staff member, a headquarters staff member, back during the Pathway Guide support sessions, once referred to the DTM project as HPL Light. And what she was referring to was that the DTM project does not require a guidance committee. It is in many ways similar. You're going to do a project, as Graham said, it's going to benefit some organization. You're going to have an action team. You've got a project I got in mind. You're going to accomplish it, not by doing it yourself, but by your working with the action team. But there is no guidance committee, no guidance committee meetings. So in that sense, more is left to you to do and to take up. You're certainly working with your action team, and you have to work with them to make it happen. But I would say that is the big difference, is the goal of the project and the fact that you're more on your own for completing the project.
Thanks. That's a great point. And I'm reminded of my own DTM project for my first Pathways. I'm one of the crazy people who have earned 2 Pathways DTMs, but my first one was to benefit an organization outside Toastmasters. And yes, no guidance committee, but my action team, man, it was difficult to lead them because this was celebrating, this was an organization celebrating its 25th anniversary. And it was messy, and there were occasional yelling matches. But, you know, I kept on reminding myself, this is not just a project. This is reality. We have a deadline. We will celebrate our 25th anniversary. We need to get there intact. So yeah, great point there, George. By the way, just a quick plug. For those of you who are thinking, but I want to talk more about the DTM project. Well, guess what? Next week, our Tuesday talks and tips. I know Jesse knows that because it's looking ahead, maybe. But next week, our topic for Tuesday talks and tips will be earning your DTM in pathways. So that we're going to focus, so you can start lining up your questions for next week if it's about the DTM in pathways. So we have, oh my gosh, we only have 9 minutes left. Are there any members of our audience who have questions or quick comments, or if Adrian, if you remember that question that flew away earlier, now's your chance. We have just 9 minutes more, or 9 minutes left. Any questions or points? Or yes, Jesse?
Yeah, I think my question is, I know under the old program, we used to have the books that we used to give to the guidance committee. So what is the guidance committee using now in pathways?
George or Graham? Or
You no longer buy a book. Sorry, go ahead, Graham.
No, be my guest. You were.
Okay. What they've done is you no longer have to buy a book in HPL because it is a level 5 project. It is fully 100% documented in the project within Basecamp.
What I did is, because my guidance committee members were all Toastmasters, I felt no compunction about giving them a copy of the PDF project. Had they been outside Toastmasters, that would have been a breach of copyright and I would have had some difficulties. But the short version is, since my guidance committee were all Toastmasters, even if they weren't at level 5 of their initial path, I felt no compunctions about flicking them a copy of the PDF of the project so that they knew what it was that we were all doing.
Yes, and of course now, Graham, you're absolved of any wrongdoing, because now everybody can take a look ahead to all the projects except the Reflect on Your Path, which is actually not a level per se, it's the completion. Wonderful. Jay, I know that you've done your HPL as well, so see, Adrian, I'm just demonstrating. It just flew away, my question. What was the question I was going to ask? Graham also got, Lori's cat got the question also. So Jay, I'm sorry, if you remember what the question was, answer it, but if not.
If the question, if you're asking what was Adrian's question, he said in the legacy system it was possible under the HPL to do the HPL before getting your Advanced Communicator Silver, but in Pathways you can't even start the DTM project until you've completed level 3. They won't actually activate the DTM project until you have completed level 3. So that was his question.
Yeah, that's one point. Okay, so we have just 6 or 7 minutes more, and I really want to make sure that people who have come in with a burning question and may not have had the chance to ask it yet. So if you do, please just unmute yourself or raise your hand. I am not seeing any hand raised. Rashmi, go ahead. Go ahead, Rashmi. Please unmute yourself.
Ma'am, my last question is this. Is this what I'm going to do, like organize a seminar, is this appropriate for the HPL project? Because in my level 4 manager project, I did the same thing. I organized a seminar. I manage a team, and the seminar was based on the leadership and communication style. So my club members could raise a question, because same thing you did in the level 4 and same kind of thing you are going in level 5. So is this appropriate?
I have my answer, but let me quickly get a quick response from our 3 panelists. Graham?
All I would say is that it tells you when you are doing your HPL, one of the things that we would suggest you do is use the skills that you have learned in your earlier levels, which is exactly what you're talking about doing. Again, as VPE, I would have no problem signing off on that because you're using the skills that you have learned in an earlier project and expanding on them.
Thank you for saying my response with a better voice and more succinctly. Yes, George, do you have a quick response to that?
I agree with Graham. In fact, you can see in some of the leadership style projects, they actually refer to building on a prior project that you did in the same path. So the new educational program is actually encouraging us not to do giant projects each time, but to build on it. So I'm aware of people who have done a DTM and have done small, medium, and bigger things that were all part of the same thing. It was a different effort. They weren't simply claiming double effort for the same work done, but they were building a program, and you're allowed to do that, and you're even encouraged to do that.
Thank you. And Jay, a quick comment or response to Rashmi? Please unmute yourself. Yes.
Yeah, it reminds me of my first boss who taught me that you can commit as many mistakes as you can, and I will point out to you, but never repeat them. So there is a learning involved with everything that we do first time. And my message to you is better and still better. Every time you do something, repetitively, you know what mistakes you did in the past. You don't repeat them. And you build on, as Graham and George both said, build on what you have done. So once you keep doing, maybe you will do this project the third time and fourth time, and you'll find that there is a mastery you can achieve into seminar management.
Thank you
You
so
may even
much.
choose.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you so much. I am looking at the time, and again, I know that there's just so much information we want to share, but we only have 3 minutes left. So very quick message from each of our three panelists. What would be your word of wisdom or advice in 45 seconds or less to all our viewers, audience right now, live, as well as those who will be watching on YouTube later?
I'll start if I may, Michelle.
Please.
To use the Nike slogan, just do it. I joined Toastmasters 40 years ago and did not get my distinguished Toastmaster, despite the fact that I'd been a member for around 10 years, because I never got around to doing a high-performance leadership project. When I rejoined Toastmasters, I was determined to get my DTM. I did my first high-performance leadership project, and I thought, I'm learning stuff. I should have done this 40 years ago. So, Nike, just do it.
Great. Thank you so much, Graham. George?
I want to contribute a different perspective. My career in Silicon Valley has included a number of very senior management positions, leadership, management, whatever, both technical and marketing. At first, I thought of the projects in Toastmasters as kind of lightweight and things I already knew how to do. And then what I realized was you have to do these projects solely and completely with volunteer effort. And so those things that I knew how to do, and even when you're signing paychecks, I mean, you do need to motivate people to do it. But in any volunteer organization, Toastmasters, your church, or whatever, you really have to persuade and motivate and inspire. So even a seasoned, experienced manager in industry will learn something doing an HPL.
Amen to that. Thank you. And Jay, a quick word of wisdom or message to our viewers.
My message is that learning never ends. We learn from our mistakes. And every time that we learn, we get better. My message is get better, still better, because then you can become able to beat the best. So keep at it, keep at it.
Wonderful. Just do it. Learn how to motivate and inspire and get better. Wow. Wow, I am blown away. I have personally gained so much from tonight's panel discussion. So please let us give our three panelists a real resounding round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you. And remember, same time next week, Tuesday Talks and Tips, episode 19. This will be a perfect segue from this session. It will be earning your DTM in pathways. So I will now switch off the recording. Thank you, everyone.